Um, I'm an ed specialist here at Foundations, and before doing this awesome work here at Foundations, I taught English and special ed for 11 years. And during that time, I also had the opportunity to work in a number of different positions in after-school program. I started as frontline staff, and gradually, as people learn that you can do the things, right? You get more and more responsibilities. You go site coordinator, program director, right? And so, I got to spend 10 years doing that too. And so it was awesome and such a fulfilling thing. But I'm also really keenly aware of that midsummer burnout. And so I'm looking forward to talking to you guys today. So thank you for joining us for today's session, which is about midsummer, Energizer activities. I'm really psyched to spend, the next hour or so exploring some, practical, but, really engaging and easy to implement activities that are designed to captivate youth during the midsummer months, right? Keep their interest when there are lots of pools and sprinklers and cool things going on outside. So whether you're a site coordinator or, group leader, youth advocate, whatever, you're going to leave today's session equipped with some fresh ideas to really energize that summer programming and promote continued learning and nurture just like stronger social connections among youth. So let's dive in. No pun intended. So before we get started with the activities, right? Let's just do a quick check-in with each other. In the chat, we're going to share two quick reflections. First, tell me a little bit about your current energy level. Give me type, high energy, medium energy, low energy in the chat. Let's just get a pulse check to see how everybody's feeling right now. I know right now for me, I'm probably like a medium energy. I need lunch. That would really help me out right now, I think. I skipped lunch and that was a poor choice now that I'm sitting here talking to you folks. Medium energy. Feels like we're getting a lot of medium energies here. Okay, listen. It's Wednesday, hump day, right? We're gonna have a little bit of some, yeah, okay. All right, I like it. I like it. I don't see medium, low. Listen, I get that too, Joanna, because listen, especially like now that we're into summer programming a little bit, you can start to really feel that drain, right? So now let's share something that's been a favorite summer activity that you've been doing so far. Now, this could be absolutely anything. It could be an outdoor game, a fun science experiment, a group project, even just like, quiet reading, like sustained silent reading. So we're going to pause briefly to let everybody type their responses in the chat. You guys are going to get to see a number of my favorites in a little bit. So I look forward to sharing all of those with you. And they're going to run the gamut between, STEM, literacy, and then we're also going to make sure that we sprinkle in some low cost or no cost activities. Organized sports, yes, absolutely. I love organized sports. We have it makes youth stay active. It also lets them compete in a team friendly environment, and it also keeps them coming back week after week, right? Because if we're say holding tournaments or stuff like that, you want to come back and keep participating with your team. I know even I mean, I used to call them disorganized sports. When we set up like little like game units, we'd have Gaga Ball over here, you have like Foursquare over here. You have all these little stations that are kind of sport-y that really work with kids. Oh, an animal care unit. I love that. That's awesome. And that really speaks to like that desire to nurture that a lot of our youth really have, right? Because they're nurtured, so they want to actually spend some time like nurturing. Yes, I love that. Reading with our kiddos, anything water play. Yes, that's right. We introduce water, period. The kids are locked in and engaged. Outside activities, swimming, hiking, absolutely, as the weather permits. I know weather's been a little rough in my part of the world right now. Mental health activities and self-regulation, always very helpful. Great to be able to just take a minute and check in with yourself, and something we're going to touch on. All right. Thank you guys for sharing. Let's jump into some fun activities, right? So, before we dive in, I just wanted to explain how we're structuring today's presentation. So we've grouped our presentation into four key areas, right? We've got our STEM activities that are going to focus on your hands-on exploratory learning experiences, right? The things that engage a student's curiosity with scientific thinking. And then we're also going to look at some literary activities, some literacy stuff, some things that emphasize that sort of creative expression element and that critical thinking through our reading, writing, storytelling. And of course, we're going to also dive into some social emotional learning activities, things, those things that just help our youth build empathy, and strengthen relationships, and develop those emotional skills that are necessary in the world, not just in school or an academic setting. And then finally, at the end, we're going to look at some low cost or no cost ones. These are perfect for quick implementation, minimal prep, moments when resources are limited, right? Those times where you just need something and like maybe your other activity fell through, maybe somebody called out, you need something right now and you don't have the time or the resources to get things together. So we've organized the presentation in this fashion to make it easy for you to find and use activities that are aligned with whatever your specific goals or needs are. All right, let's get started with our STEM stuff. So our first STEM activity is near and dear to my heart, and I enjoy it quite a bit. It's solar oven s'mores, right? So here's how you're going to end up guiding students through this kind of thing, right? You're going to tell them that today we're going to harness the sun's energy to cook a tasty treat, right? Something like that, some hook. We're going to build it. We're going to build our own mini oven using materials that, you find in your program space. A cardboard box, aluminum foil, clear plastic wrap, some black construction paper. You cut the flap lid on the box and you leave the one edge attached, right? You line the inside of the box and the flap with the aluminum foil, and this acts like a mirror to reflect sunlight into the oven. And then you place the black construction paper on the bottom. That black, we go through letting them know that black absorbs the most heat, right? The light comes through it, it refracts off it. Whatever level our students are at, we can meet them there, right? Because this is something that you can do for 3 to 8. So if you're talking to your eighth grade kiddos, you can start talking about light refraction and all of those things. And then you stretch your clear plastic wrap over the opening that you created and you seal it, right? And then you ask students to predict how long it's going to take for something like chocolate and marshmallows to start melting while we're doing our s'mores, right? Then you dig deeper. You ask them what factors might change it, like speed it up or slow it down, like the angle of the sun, cloud cover. And then, you have them write down those predictions. And then, you take the oven, you seal it, you position it in direct sunlight. You get all your marshmallows and your chocolate together. And, we check back in every 5 minutes with the kids, right? And of course, they're going to be impatient because one, they want s'mores, two, science is cool, right? So, we check back in every 5 minutes. We note temperature changes. We log them down, as the temperature increases, and we note how long it takes the marshmallows to start to soften, things like that. And then after about 20 minutes or so, you gather everybody together and you say, okay, well, whose s'mores melted the fastest, right? What do you think happened? Why do you think their s'mores melted, more quickly than yours? And then depending on the age group, if you're talking about your eighth graders again, you can talk about things like how is this similar to solar panels and how they generate electricity? You can bridge those concepts between heat transfer and that real world solar technology. So partially because I'm hungry and partially because I'm curious to know what else would you guys cook in a solar oven? What could you do in a solar oven with your kiddos besides s'mores that, could be interesting and engaging to them? Or like how else would you expand on this activity? I know that I would definitely make sure that I do love chocolate chip cookies. I love that. Um, And then we can also bring in a little more math too, because we can talk about like our ratios of when we're making like the mixture of chocolate chip cookies, if we're in fact, making the dough for it. Yeah, do you think popcorn would pop? Mini pizzas, I love. Yeah, right. Those just the itty bitty ones that like maybe like they have in the Lunchables or whatever, and you can like melt the cheese on there. Oh man, it comes out really well. Little bagel pizzas, yeah. Bagel and I did bagel pizzas one time as a special snack in conjunction with this, and it was a real hit. Admittedly, I spent a very long time next to that solar oven doing it, but I mean, it's worth it. We all know it's worth it, right? Yes, nachos. Nachos are also one of my favorites. All you gotta do is melt the cheese. It's perfect. All right, awesome. Now that I'm starving, let's move on to water, right? Um, So now that we've seen the power of sunlight to transform our ingredients, let's look at another essential resource, right? So in this activity, students are going to engineer their own water filters, right? They're going to turn dirty water clear, and they're going to figure out how layers of gravel, sand, and charcoal work together to filter out these impurities, right? So let's take a look at what the actual water filtration challenge looks like, right? So clean water is vital in many communities, right? And that lack of reliable access. And that's something that we can tie in to the actual community that we're in, right? Um, I'm sorry, I just saw cookies in the chat and I got hungry again. So today, we're going to make our students environmental engineers, right? By building some filters from just some simple materials. Uh, so you're going to give each group a clear plastic bottle cut in half, and then you're going to give them some gravel, some sand, and some activated charcoal. Um, you show them the dirty water that you've prepared, right? You get muddy water that's like either has like soil or coffee grounds in it. Um, and then you have them take the top of the bottle and you put it upside down on top of the cut up bottle. And that creates a little funnel for them. And then they're going to layer the gravel. Yeah, absolutely. This is a real issue in a lot of communities, right? And so you're teaching kids how they can directly impact their community, and you're teaching them about what it actually means to filter out clear water. Yeah. Um, so as you get your filter ready, you have the funnel, and then you put in sand, gravel, and the activated charcoal, right? You want to stress the importance when you're doing this of leveling it and gently packing it, right? You're going to want to like let them know that the water needs space to actually go through. It can't be so packed that the water is barely coming through. So when the filter's ready, all you got to do is let the students pour the dirty water into the funnel, and you'll have a little basin that collects the clear water at the bottom. And then we have a little observation log that goes with it, and we observe the changes to color, clarity, flow rate, stuff like that. Some great guiding discussions for an activity like this are things like why does each layer matter? Why is each individual layer important, and what does it do? Um, and then again, tying it back to our real world, water treatment things, ask how do real world water treatment plants use a similar process to this, but at a large scale so that we all have potable water, right? And then, depending on the age group, you can start talking about like once you get into like high school, we start talking about the actual physics challenges that and chemistry challenges that engineers face when they're scaling designs like this to entire cities. Now that we have fresh water, let's shift to growing. Let's go to the earth. So, our next experiment is a plant growth experiment, right? So this is an opportunity for our students to become junior botanists. They're going to plant seeds and track how factors like water, light, and soil impact development. So this activity is a great way to introduce scientific observation using plant biology. And plant biology is just innately interesting. Just watching something grow is interesting at any age, but particularly for our kiddos. So you start by giving them small pots and some potting soil and seeds. I recommend beans, or there are some peas that are really great and fast germinating varieties that are great for this too. I have made the mistake of using very slow growing things, and our students tend to not be that patient, and quite frankly, neither am I. So you're going to demonstrate for them how to fill the pot, plant the seeds just below the surface, and then, of course, you're going to label each pot with the growing conditions. Um, and then you're going to give your students an observational chart that they're going to fill in, day by day, week by week, where they record the things like changes in height, the number of leaves, coloration, right? Um, we're going to do some predictions before we plant to figure out which conditions are going to yield the tallest plants, stuff like that. What conditions are going to be best for them. And then, we could have brief check-in days, right? Little botany check-in sessions where we all group together and say, okay, well, how are your plants growing? Let's look at your logs. And then during those times, you can ask things like, were your predictions accurate? What surprised you? Um, and then depending on the grade, again, you can ask like, how do real world farmers use similar things? to improve crop yields, right? Like how do they take these things into account to make sure that we have the most crops that we can possibly have? So those are our STEM tips, or those are our STEM activities. I just want to give you a couple guiding thoughts for as you're like, for your facilitation. I'm sorry, again, should have eaten. Of these activities. So you're going to want to encourage inquiry-based learning, right? Rather than like just showing them the right way, which is easier and shorter. You're going to want to invite the students to experiment, that trial and error, right? Even if it's something that you know isn't going to work, I always love all right, well, let's try it your way first, and we'll see what happens. Just that little shift hands ownership to of the experiment and the learning to them, and it sparks genuine curiosity, right? They're not just waiting for you to tell them the next thing, they are experimenting and discovering. So when you're doing that, you're going to want to make sure that you ask open-ended questions, right? We avoid yes or no's. We use questions like, well, what do you predict will happen if we tilt your solar oven at like a steeper angle? Or why do you think the water in this bottle came out clearer than the other one? These are the kind of questions that don't have a single right answer, right? So students have to draw on their own observational and reasoning skills. Um, this type of question helps promote critical thinking and exploration, right? When a student's hypothesis doesn't work out, facilitate a discussion about their observations and their conclusions, right? Instead of just letting them be discouraged, walk them through the actual scientific process. What happened? What did you predict? What did you observe? And what do we conclude from that? It helps them iterate on the scientific process, developing new hypotheses to test. So let's move to literacy, which is near and dear to my heart as a former English teacher. So in our previous section, we saw firsthand how impactful questions, inquiry, are elevating STEM activities, right? Let's shift our focus to the power of words. Language and stories shape our understanding of the world. They foster empathy. And most importantly, they ignite imagination, right? So throughout this literacy session, we're going to explore some engaging activities that encourage students to critically analyze texts. Um, Also, sharing their unique perspectives and expressing themselves creatively. Just as we invited curiosity in STEM, we're going to use literature as a springboard for critical thinking um, and self-expression. So our first literacy activity here is called Summer Storytelling Circles. In this activity, we bring students together in any comfortable environment you might have. Any place you can create an inviting circle where kids are going to be comfortable sitting down. You're going to want to create an environment where everyone feels encouraged to share and listen actively, right? Let everybody know that their opinions are valid and they're all being heard. Then you're going to prepare by selecting a variety of age-appropriate books and storytelling prompts, right? These could be something simple like pictures. They could just be like the opening sentence of a story, or you could give them like, little simple scenarios to work through. And then you invite students to take turns either retelling a story that they've read or heard, or creating an entirely new story of their own based on the prompts that are provided. Um, when they're doing this, you're really going to want to encourage their use of descriptive language and imagination. You're going to want to prompt students with questions like what do you imagine that the character is feeling right now? Right. So not just asking like what the character would do next. What are they feeling? Right. Letting them really dig down into characterization. Or something like, can you describe the setting? But like clearly enough so that I can see it in my head. So that the kids really take a moment to think about what descriptive language means when it comes to creating a setting. the goal here is not just storytelling, like, having fun telling stories, but it's also fostering active listening, right? As students share, you're going to want to remind their peers to listen respectfully and attentively, right? And then after each story, you encourage some feedback that celebrates that creativity, and then you gently guide them towards how to reflect on how listening really helped them enjoy more deeply, right? So, moving on from performing stories to creating them, our next activity invites younger students to step into the roles of authors and illustrators. In the bookmaking activity, students become authors and illustrators of their own unique stories, right? They might have made them up in our previous storytelling circle, but actually being able to create those stories and turn them into books is really great. And I actually really like using the storytelling circles like that to lead into this activity, because then once they have like this fire of an idea of a story in their mind, you're like, all right, let's turn it into a book. And they are completely on board. So then once you already have them hooked, you just got to give them the supplies, right? You give them an array of paper, markers, crayons, pencils, whatever other art supplies. I'm not a fan of glitter, but if you're a fan of glitter, give them glitter too. Walk students through the basic structure of storytelling, right? Beginning, middle, end, right? Like let them know what the actual basic structure of a story is. And then you encourage them to create stories about whatever sparks their interest. Again, these are times where you could give them like a picture prompt, you can give them little short sentence starters. Or you could just ask them to do something about like their family, an adventure they went on, favorite animals. Favorite animals is always a good one. Um, when students are creating their books, you want to ask them some leading questions like, that's really cool. So what happens next? Like what do they do? Or wow, that character sounds really cool. What problem do they need to solve in your story? Right? To deepen their understanding of narrative structure. Because they might really be good at characterization, but not understand how that plot needs to move, right? So they have a really cool character, but what is the character actually doing? What conflict are they encountering? Um, so once complete, it's a really fun idea to hold a little publishing party where kids read their books like out loud or they showcase them to their peers. I actually like making this a family engagement event, and you bring in the families and we have a sort of readers theater. It's really awesome, and you would be surprised. Families that you don't see show up ever will show up for things like that. And it gives you an opportunity to celebrate that creativity. Um, so I just want to ask you guys in the chat, what do you think your book would be about, right? Like if you were going to make a book right now, what would your book be about? I think my book might be about swimming right now because I'd really very much like to be in a pool. Summer vacation, cool. I like that. Narwhals, very fun. Very cool. I see you, Pam. My greatest adventure. And the question is that a made up adventure or is that a greatest adventure that you've been on, right? And travel, yeah, going to all types of crazy places, whether they're, real places or they're invented places. Absolutely, yeah. Thank you guys for sharing. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, fish fry Friday. See, Pam, you're making me hungry again. And uh, oh, oh, I like that. Listen, as somebody who loves sci-fi, Rex, I love the idea of being transported to some strange new planet and figuring out new, like, animals and plants. And whale watching, yeah. I love that. I love the idea of just being able to just be out on the sea, like just deep, so you can't even see the land, and you see these amazing whales. These are awesome, and they would all make really great books. Thank you guys for sharing. So, building on that creativity and fun, our next activity leverages visual storytelling um, through the use of comic strips. So, let's take a look at how comics can support literacy, right? Comic strips are a really engaging way for students to explore storytelling through both words and visuals, right? They really help, especially when you're working through things like plot, and the beginning, middle, and end. That's really excellent for being able to teach that because you have a three-panel comic and it's like, okay, well, beginning, middle, end, right? Like it sort of forces them to align with the narrative structure of storytelling, which can help them understand it. So for this, you're going to want to provide comic templates, some drawing supplies, markers. You're going to want to invite students to craft their own stories, something that they completely make up that sounds really cool to them. Whether you think it'll work in a comic or not, again, it's like, all right, well, let's try your idea. Let's see if it works. Um, it's a good idea to discuss with students how dialogue and visuals can kind of get combined to convey meaning, emotions, action. Um, as they start working and creating their comic strips, ask them guiding questions like how will your illustrations help readers understand your story, right? Something like that. Or um, what emotions are your characters showing? Why is your character sad in this middle panel? Something like that. You're going to want to encourage students to share their completed comic strips, not just with their peers, because they're going to want to share them with everybody once they've done something really cool with them. Um, and when they do that, you're going to want to encourage them to discuss like actually what inspired them with the people that they're showing it to. Don't just show the story, tell them how you built that story, right? Tell them how you created and crafted the bones of that story. So, just a couple facilitation tips for when it comes to our literacy activities, right? Um, as educators and program leaders, one of our key roles is shaping an environment that not just invites, but excites students about reading and writing, right? Creating a literacy rich space is really foundational to making students feel inspired, valued, and eager to engage with literacy. It also shows that you personally value literacy, which is something that's really important to model for your students. Um, and that really begins by sort of thoughtfully uh, arranging your learning space, right? You're going to want to make sure that you're displaying books prominently, but accessibly, right? Like not high up, like someplace where they see it, it intrigues them and they can like take it and look at it. Someplace that's accessible on shelves, tables. Um, of course, I always had like a nice little reading corner. And in program, I had my little lending library, which was a great way to get kids to engage. Um, when you're building that repository of books, your little library, include books that represent diverse authors, characters, cultures, languages, experiences. It's hard to do that, especially because sometimes when our resources are low, we're building our library from like donated books or library book sales, but it's still something that you want to keep in mind and embrace as much as possible. This kind of diversity ensures that every student sees themselves and their peers reflected, right? It promotes that inclusion and it just creates a stronger sense of belonging for all of your students. Now, you want to make sure that the materials vary in type, right? You want to make sure that there's fiction, nonfiction, graphic novels, magazines, poetry, picture books to cater to all types of different reading levels. Um, you gonna want to regularly rotate them and refresh your materials, right? Because you'd be surprised how quickly students will disengage when they just see the same titles over and over and over. Like, oh no, there were only like four books there, and I've read those books. Or only four books there that interested me, and I read those four books. So now, no, I'm done with the library. But if you keep rotating them in and out, then it becomes something very different. You're also going to want to actively model that enthusiasm for reading yourself. It's easy when you really do love reading, but you're going to want to demonstrate that interest. You can do things like, reading aloud, You can share your favorite passage from a book. You can discuss just a book that you personally enjoy. I love like you're sitting with kids that just don't feel like, doing like, they finish snack early or something like that. And you're sitting down with them and you're having a conversation about a book that you really liked. And that starts encouraging them to share books that they really liked. And they start sharing with each other. And all of a sudden, you've like organically created a discussion about literacy. You're also going to want to use consistent and positive reinforcement to motivate your students, right? You recognize their efforts in their program and their progress openly and constantly, no matter how small the progress is, you want to praise it, right? My father always used to say, any movement in the correct direction is progression. And that's the way that you want to approach this, right? You want to any little incremental success you want to celebrate. I love how creatively you describe that scene. Um, you chose a challenging book and stuck with it. I'm really impressed with your determination, right? Things like that. But specific praise, not good job, not you're doing so great. Specific praise of something you see them doing in the moment. That kind of feedback is very impactful and it helps students build their confidence and their motivation, right? And that that endorphin rush that from being praised that they get, that reinforces that literacy is a rewarding and enjoyable practice. Um, oh, you're also going to want to encourage student reading choice, right? By allowing learners to select texts that intrigue them personally instead of just directing them towards a book to read. Um, it's really cool if you have a number of students that are reading, the same book or like the same series to facilitate book talks. And where students briefly share some recommendations with their peers. Um, and that sort of like cultivates a little community of readers. Um, I've had experiences where I've started those things, and then all of a sudden there's a group over there that's just talking about books. Me not involved at all. I have no idea, but they're over there just chatting about, the favorite, like their new favorite book or whatever. But just in general, you're going to want to incorporate literacy into daily routines, right? You begin or end each session with like a brief literacy activity, maybe some journaling, quick writes, short reading discussions, just some habits that really embed literacy seamlessly into your program's culture and demonstrate to your students that reading and writing aren't separate tasks, but they're integral to everyday life. When you really thoughtfully cultivate this type of literacy rich environment, you empower your students to not just become confident critical readers and writers, but also lifelong lovers of like literacy and reading in general. So, building upon this positivity and this good feeling, right? Our next activity helps students practice gratitude regularly, highlighting the importance of recognizing and appreciating everyday moments and people, frankly. Gratitude jars are a really great way for students to practice gratitude daily or weekly. You start by giving each student a small jar or a container or whatever you have, and an assortment of art supplies, markers, stickers, again, glitter if that's your thing, ribbons, colorful paper, stuff like that. Um, and then you invite the students to decorate their jars creatively, making them unique, personal, making them, representative of them. Once the jars are decorated, you explain that these jars are gonna hold notes of gratitude, right? You encourage students either daily, weekly, to write down something they're grateful for. These are the kind of things that can range from small joys to bigger moments, like spending time with, loved ones. I got to see, grandma came to visit, something like that. Periodically, what you're going to do is set aside a moment for students to revisit their jars, right? They take a note, and if they're comfortable, share that gratitude with the group. This reinforces, appreciation, fosters a positive atmosphere just in your program in general, and it remind students that everyday things can really enrich their lives in a significant way, even if they feel small. Um, when you're doing this, some easy ways to facilitate some discussion around gratitude, because sometimes, kids get a little taciturn when it comes to that. You ask them things like, how does it feel to think about what you're thankful for? Like, right? Like that metacognitive piece. How does it feel to think about the thing you're grateful for? Um, Something else like how can practicing gratitude regularly make a difference in our mood or our personal relationships, right? That's particularly great for our middle schoolers, our seventh, eighth graders. Um, Really helps them take a step back and put things in perspective, particularly when life can start to feel overwhelming. So let's take a moment for all of us to share, right? Uh, what's going to go in your gratitude? If you were going to put something in your gratitude jar today, what is going to go in it today? Why don't you go ahead and share in the chat with me? I, frankly, in my gratitude jar today, it's going to be how incredibly like responsive and interactive you guys are, and just how many of you there are. It's amazing to see so many people, engaged with the discussion. That's it. Milton, like, again, that's what my father used to say. I'm grateful for just waking up this morning, right? I'm grateful for my amazing coworkers. Yes, absolutely. I'm glad that you're grateful for this session. You know what? I take it back. That might be what I goes in my jar. Although, you know what? I don't have to limit it to just one thing. It's also going in my jar. Good, caring friends, right? Yes. Yes, something that sometimes we can take for granted. Fun with family and friends. Yes, absolutely. We need to cherish every one of those moments that we can, and we need to look back on those moments, right? And that's what a gratitude jar can do. It can be, oh yeah, that time when I went to the beach with my family, man, yeah, that was an amazing memory. My student leadership team and my amazing faculty, absolutely, Rex. Because I mean, it takes a village, right? We all know that we can't provide quality programming alone, especially with the number of kids that need our quality programming. A yummy lunch, Monica. I see you. I see you, Monica. All right. You're making me hungry, and that makes me sad. But that's okay, because we're going to move on with our next SEL, right? Just because I'm sad, we could do an SEL roleplay. So, next, we're going to explore an interactive approach to conflict resolution and just like teaching empathy through SEL roleplaying. So this gives students a safe space to practice responding to social dilemmas, right? Because it's at first social role play, like SEL role play, that it might seem a little silly, but really what you're doing is giving them an opportunity to deal with what could be uncomfortable scenarios in a safe space, so that when they are actually presented with those scenarios in real life, they they don't feel completely overwhelmed, right? They have some frame of reference. So SEL roleplay provides students with an engaging and practical way to practice that empathy, right? But not just empathy, critical thinking and conflict resolution. Um, what you're going to do is prepare some scenario cards depicting realistic, age appropriate social conflicts or dilemmas, right? Um, Disagreements between friends, misunderstandings, scenarios where people are excluded, those are good common ones, right? You're definitely going to want to do them ahead of time though, because you're going to want to be very careful and thoughtful about the scenarios which you choose. And so coming up with them on the fly isn't really conducive to that. Then you divide students into either pairs or small groups, depending on like the size of your group. And you give them each a scenario card. You explain that they're going to act out their scenarios, and then they're going to work together to identify the feelings, the motivations, and the appropriate responses, right? So we're not just giving it to them and they're, acting out a scene. We're giving it to them. We're letting them analyze the actual scenario and the emotions that are involved in it and the conflict, and then present it, right? After each role play, we can then facilitate a reflective discussion. We can say, what emotions did your characters feel? How did they manage those feelings? What alternative solutions might there be in real life that could also be effective here, right? Those kinds of discussions, so that it's not just the group that you've assigned this scenario that is reflecting on the emotions involved and the conflict involved, but it's the entire group, right? The larger group. Um, you're going to want to encourage multiple perspectives, right? Because all of your students are going to have very diverse perspectives, and therefore diverse ways of resolving conflict. As long as those are healthy ways of resolving conflict, you're going to want to validate all of those, regardless of how diverse they are. You just want to ensure that you're highlighting how empathy, understanding somebody else's feelings guides healthy problem solving. You're going to want to reinforce the concept that practicing through role play equips students to handle the real life challenges that they encounter more effectively, right? It gives them some frame of reference for when they encounter what would otherwise be an incredibly stressful scenario out in the real world. So we're going to do I'd like to do just a little SEL scenario, right? Um, so imagine that there are two students that are arguing over sharing markers, right? Type your thoughts in the chat and let's discuss how you would guide these students to its a positive resolution, right? So let's pretend that that's the scenario that I gave your group and you guys are talking about it, right? We're going to want to talk about like feelings, empathy, fairness. Just let me know how you would guide students towards a positive resolution of this disagreement over sharing markers, which is, I mean, something that we've all run into, whether it's markers or whatever other, limited resource you might have. Sharing is constantly a problem. So how do we encourage our students to, be better sharers and resolve a conflict that might emerge because of that? I know I would say something akin to I understand that you both want these colors, but what would it be directly, would it directly harm what you're doing if you use this color instead of this color? Can we both use other colors? Oh, I like this too. How would you feel if you didn't have the colors you needed because somebody wasn't sharing, right? Make them think about how the other person is feeling in that scenario. It's really important, especially with our younger kids, to foster that sense of empathy early and often so that students are constantly thinking about how other people would feel in a scenario, right? Thinking about the way that they want to be treated. We have the golden rule, right? Treat others the way that you would like to be treated. But really what we're looking at is the platinum rule. Treat other people the way they want to be treated, right? I love this. Hey guys, there are so many colors to use. If someone else is using the color, let's just use another color until they're finished. We'll take turns with the materials, right? Yeah, exactly. Like we don't need that color for your entire picture. Let's use another, let's color another part of this picture where you don't need that color right now. Acknowledge the enthusiasm to participate in the activity, encourage them to consider a creative way to represent whatever they're seeking to draw. Right, yeah. Hey, have you thought about drawing it this way instead? I love that. Awesome. Thank you guys. So, having practiced spreading kindness outward, we're going to now turn inward, right? We're going to provide a safe outlet for managing anxiety through worry boxes. So, worry boxes offer students a quiet, reflective way to process their own thoughts and emotions. I mean, very similar to gratitude jars, but with a very different lens and a very different focus, right? Because the purpose of this activity is to give students a um, tangible method for expressing and releasing anxiety, um, or like uncertainty, any kind of stress, really. So we start by giving each student a small box. I like it to be just a recycled container to just foster that sense of sustainability with my students. I like to just like hit that early and often. Um, and or it could be like shoe boxes they bring from home, even just like some paper envelopes. And then again, you give them all types of creative supplies for decorating the box, markers, washi tape, stickers, construction paper, all types of crazy stuff, right? Um, you give them plenty of time to really personalize their boxes, right? Because you want this box to feel safe, um, personal, and private for them so that they can do the next part, right? So next, we introduce the practice of writing down worries, right? You encourage students to write down or draw if they feel more comfortable their thoughts on a slip of paper. Um, these could be things that made them nervous that day, just heavy feelings they're carrying, right? Because we don't realize just how many heavy feelings our kiddos walk around with on a daily basis, and they just have no idea how to process them. Um, or just questions they don't feel sure about, right? Like things that are making them uneasy. Um, then they fold that paper, they place it into their box, and they make it clear, you make it clear that the boxes are private unless students choose to share, right? Then reinforce that putting a worry in the box symbolizes letting it go, right? Even just temporarily. Just you've written it down, it exists here, and now you can let it go just for a moment. Just like you tell them, just like writing a to-do list, right? Helps us stop thinking about the tasks that we need to do. Writing our worries helps our brain reset, right? It doesn't mean that the problem's fixed, right? But it gives us a break and just a little emotional breathing space, which frankly we could all use more of, particularly now. So, um, when it comes to sharing, you can offer like optional sharing moments, right? For example, you invite students who feel that they're ready to share a worry and receive supportive responses from the group to, like, come up and share. This is really important because it helps normalize vulnerability, and it strengthens peer empathy, right? Like it, especially as kids like mature and they worry more about like external social pressures. Revealing vulnerability and admitting that vulnerability is something that becomes very difficult, and that's why we want to normalize the fact that everybody has moments of vulnerability, and that our peers can help us support, like it can help be a support network for us in those moments. um, this is an activity that you're going to want to use regularly, right? You're not just a one and done. You want to keep revisiting it, right? Because it promotes emotional regulation, right? It's really good to do it either at the beginning or the end of a session because kids come into your program sometimes heavy with the worries of the school day, or we all know that sometimes kids have some serious worries when it comes to going home. So sometimes it helps to just have a helpful and healthy place to express those worries. Either way, it encourages quiet self-awareness, right? And it helps students learn that acknowledging their emotions is a strength, not a weakness. So, as we close out this section, let's look at some key facilitation strategies, right, for SEL. Um, Facilitating SEL's it's about way more than just the actual content, right? It's about creating a climate where students feel emotionally safe and seen and supported. Emotional safety is foundational for learning, and it begins with how we show up as adults in the spaces for our kids, right? So, first, we're going to want to clearly communicate expectations for group respect and kindness, right? You set the tone early and often by co-creating group agreements with your students, right? Reinforcing your group norms. Um, this might sound something like, remember, we listen without interrupting. We speak from the heart. Um, Remember, we always are kind to ourselves and others. You revisit the norms regularly and you model them consistently. Second, you want to consistently model empathy and active listening, right? Your students watch how you respond to each emotion and interaction. They're watching you constantly. So when a student shares something vulnerable or difficult, show empathy with phrases like, "Thank you for trusting us with that," or, "And that sounds tough, and I'm really glad that you shared it with me." These are the kind of responses that create a ripple effect that invites honesty from other people because they see, just how empathetic you are. Um, and then third, you're going to want to validate your students' feelings, right? Even if it's an emotion that seems minor to us, it might be significant to your students. So avoid phrases like, and I, I hate it. Like, I understand why it gets used, but I hate the phrase, don't worry about it, or you'll be fine, right? Um, it's it's much more helpful to say something like, it makes sense that you'd feel that way. Or, that's a lot to carry and deal with. I'm here for you if you want to talk about it. Things like that. And then you want to encourage participation gently, right? You're not forcing anybody to share or do anything they're not capable of do. A lot of kids might be shy, anxious, unsure. So you just provide multiple ways to engage: drawing, group sharing, private journaling, and you acknowledge that all contributions of all types makes makes the environment more welcoming. So we've covered STEM, literacy, SEL activities, right? Each engaging and effective. But we also recognize that sometimes you need an activity quickly, right? With little to no cost or preparation. So, in this section, we'll explore some simple, highly engaging activities that are perfect for spontaneous moments, transition times, days when materials are limited, right? So, let's begin by stepping outdoors for an adventure that boosts observational skills and teamwork, right? The nature scavenger hunt. So the nature scavenger hunt's a really fun, engaging outdoor activity that requires a little preparation, right? It helps students sharpen their observational skills, encourages collaboration, nurtures appreciation for nature, things like that. Uh, it pre- so you just prepare a list, something, or you could just use verbal prompts for items that students might find outdoors. Something like, okay, well, for this item, you're looking for something green. For this item, you're looking for a leaf bigger than your hand. The smoothest rock you can find, things like that, right? You divide students into small groups. You set very clear boundaries for safe exploration, which is very important. Yes, all kids do need more time outdoors, and this is a great and constructive way to do that without it just being free play out in the woods, right? So then you explain the activity very clearly. You work together. You find as many items as you can from the list and the prompts provided. Um, Pay close attention to your surroundings and be respectful of nature. Observe without disturbing, things like that. As students explore, circulate amongst the groups, right? Prompt them with questions like, what'd you notice about the environment when you were searching? Did working together help you find things easier, faster? Um, Afterward, gather students and you facilitate a reflective discussion. Um, you say things like, what surprised you about what you found? How did working together help your team? Emphasize the importance and um, sort of the appreciating nature, like the importance of just being um, present in nature, but also being a careful observer and the value of teamwork. So just real quick, um, what is one thing that you guys would have them find out in a nature scavenger hunt? Or why don't you share in the chat for me? What I love is always find me an like an uncommon colored bird, something like that. Yeah, okay, so there we go. So we live in urban spaces. So finding feathers, eggs in the spring. That I mean, it would be cool. Yeah, yeah. Purple front door. Different types of leaves, bugs, birds, right? Yeah, like find me like a maple leaf, find me an oak leaf, something like that. I like that too. Something with a texture that you find interesting. I like that. Yeah, and bringing that tactile sense, right? Like, so find something that just like feels cool out in nature. That's still safe for you to bring in, right? Because man, you might get some interesting things brought in. Um, Different types of flowers and grass. Can you find a spider web, right? Is Charlotte out there spinning a web? Sounds. I love that, Pam. That's something I didn't even think of, right? Like, what do you hear out there? Did you, did you hear a bird? Did you hear a woodpecker or something like that? Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing. So, after a nice active exploration outside, let's transition to a sort of a calming activity that's designed to help students sort of pause and refocus and recenter, right? We have our mindfulness minute, right? A mindfulness minute is a really simple yet incredibly powerful activity that's designed to help students pause, relax, and refocus that attention, right, on the present moment. Um, Again, requires no preparation of materials, so it's really ideal for a quick transition or movements where or moments where students really need a quick reset, right? You carefully explain mindfulness to your students. You say something like, mindfulness means paying attention to the moment you're in right now with no judgment, right? It helps our minds calm down, our bodies relax, and improve focus. You invite students to sit down, close their eyes, softly gaze downward, whatever they feel comfortable with, and then you guide them through some, you know, gentle breathing exercises, right? Inhale slowly through your nose, feel the air in your lungs, exhale slowly through your mouth. After about a minute, you ask kids, like, how did you feel after that minute? Do you notice anything different? You notice, anything different in yourself? And then you close by emphasizing that mindfulness is a tool that they can use anytime that they start to feel anxiety, right? During tests, or before a test, during conflict, or just to relax. Before we move on, I do want to encourage you all to complete the feedback form that just got dropped in the chat, letting us know how much you enjoyed this session. That would be very helpful to us and also helps you when it comes to getting a certificate of completion for this training. So let's close out with group story creation, right? This is one of my favorite types of creative like group storytelling. Um, and it's perfect for sparking collaboration, right? So you engage students in a collaborative storytelling environment by arranging them in a circle. You introduce the activity by saying, together, today, we're going to create a story. I'll start by saying one sentence, then each person's going to add a sentence at a time. We don't know where the story is going to go, so let's have fun and be creative, right? And then you just let them create the story on their own. You'd be surprised what kind of fun and wacky stories you get. And it's a really just great, fun activity that also helps sort of relieve some stress. So, as we come to the end of our time today, I want to thank you for being here and again encourage you to complete the feedback form. And if you would like to reach out to me, here is my email. I'm going to hand it back to Hillary to close us out.
Thank you, Chaz. Thank you for being here. To all of you for coming, please take a moment and fill out the brief survey about our session. The link is in the chat. We value your feedback, and our aim is to meet your needs through these sessions. A certificate of attendance will be sent within a week to all of you who attended live and who complete the survey. You need to do both parts. And we hope you will join us in September. We'll be off for the month of August for the next session. So thank you all, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Give you just a moment to grab the link if you didn't already. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.